Hi, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Mortgage Musketeer, where today I'm going to be talking to you about mortgage advice for newlyweds. Yes, in honor of my nephew and my new niece, I figured I would produce something that would be helpful not only to them, but to a lot of people that I run into on a weekly basis. So often I deal with families that have just newly formed, whether that's like brand new families or families that have been divorced and have two separate families and are joining them together. There's a lot of different financial aspects that come together that are important to understand when it comes to the lending industry. So one of the first things that I will say is when you join households, go ahead and get your credit pulled. All right, so that could be a matter of reaching out to the credit bureaus. Once a year you can get a free credit pull. Make sure you get your FICO. Don't rely on Credit Karma. Here's the video. All right, Credit Karma's wrong. Might be a good starting point just to see what's out there, but you gotta get your credit pulled or reach out to your favorite lender and see what they can do to help you out, because you want to have a good credit review. You want to understand what your joint families are getting into. All right, because one of the biggest issues that are out there in the lending world is when newly formed households get together and the first time they understand what their credit histories are is when the lender pulls the credit. And that can rip the rug out from underneath them, and then there are some uncomfortable conversations. I have heard an earful from several people about that. So when you get married, it's for better, worse, or richer or poorer. Just understand that whatever you're entering into the marriage with, you guys are going to have to deal with it and come together and deal with it together. And it doesn't matter what happened in the past, because I hear that too. I hear, well, you see what happened was, it doesn't matter. What matters is what do we do going forward? And there are ways to get that taken care of. If your credit has issues, get credit repair. Start on it early so that you can get it repaired and so that there are no secrets. Because money and secrets in that regard tend to be one of the leading causes of divorce. So, have everything out in the open and have those candid conversations. Get your credit pulled, because then it's all out there and then you can address the issues. I do a lot of that when I have divorced couples that are coming together, two separate households, and oftentimes when people go through a divorce, credit gets messy. And I've talked about that in other videos, but just remember, don't use a divorce as a weapon for credit. Don't use credit as a weapon during a divorce. All right, it's just bad news for everybody. You wreck both sides, okay? But it happens. So then the question is, what do we do to address it? And it's going to take a little bit of time, so address it up front. Okay? The next thing that you want to do is make sure that you actually have a joint checking account or savings account. Just have some type of joint monetary account. A lot of times these accounts are kept separate and people either don't get around to it, or I find, especially with it's on both sides, I find that people are on accounts with their parents, all right, and that gets messy. So when the money is in an account that has somebody else on it, then that other person then gets sucked into your loan because they're on your bank account. So you have to do a pooled funds letter, or in some cases when you have two couples that come together, one has all the money and the other has the income, happens a lot, then even though you're married, because it's separate accounts, if the other person is not on the loan, it becomes a gift. I know that sounds funny. You're gifting the money to your spouse. It's a paper drill, okay? Not a big deal, but you can alleviate a lot of that if you go ahead and truly join your family into a joint account. And you may have reasons to have separate accounts, and that's fine, but at least have a joint account that you guys can pull your money into. All right. Now, again, remember that 60-day look back. So whatever the starting balance is 2 months ago is what we're going to be looking at. So if one person has a lot of money and you know you're going to be buying a house, go ahead and transfer it into that joint account sooner than later so it can season for at least 60 days. Okay. All right. So the other thing that you want to do, and this is so important, I'm telling you, most of America could buy a house if they just listen to this one piece of advice. Stop paying your rent with cash. All right? Stop. Pay it with a check. Pay it every month. Don't pay in advance. Don't think, well, I'm going to be a better renter and I'm going to pay 3 months in advance. You are hosing yourself. You need to have one single payment every month for the exact amount of what your rent is, so that on every single month, on time, we could show 12 months of on-time rent history with a canceled check. If you can do that, even if your credit isn't the best, even if your debt-to-income ratio is high, we can do something called a manual underwrite, okay? With a manual underwrite, normally the debt-to-income ratio needs to be around 43% or lower, but the credit scores don't impact you as much. If we do a manual underwrite, you can get into a home, but the first thing that they're going to ask for is 12 months of on-time rent history. And if you pay your rent with cash, that makes it almost impossible. And the other thing people do, and I've talked about this before, is if your rent is $500, you'll take out $700 from the bank and then give $500 to your landlord and then use $200 for groceries. So if we go back, even if you paid cash, if we had 12 months of bank statements and you pulled out $500 each month only, we could say, hey, this is where every month they pulled out $500. But people don't do that. They pull out $700 or $900 or whatever. It's never the same. So get a checking account, and I hear people, well, I don't have a check. If you pay rent, get a checking account and pay once a month your rent on time with a check so that we can show 12 months of canceled checks. Then half of America or more that aren't otherwise qualified could buy a house. That simple. Do it. Okay. The other thing I find out is when people come together, they join their family in a marriage, and young couples in particular, they get together, they're just coming out of college or there's no college involved and they're just starting out and it's just a little bit of a struggle in the beginning, and then life starts to pick up for them. Get a good job, get a raise, stuff is coming together, you got a kid, you've stepped up, you've really done a good job, and your joint household is doing fantastic. And what's the number one thing that people do? They go out and buy a car that they cannot afford. All right, stop, for the love. Please stop buying a massive car. Don't. You know how many people that I try and pre-qual that cannot buy a home because they have a $600 to $800 car payment? Half of them could buy a house. Half of them, that's a mortgage payment. All right? Buy your house before you buy your toy. Okay? I know we all want a nice new car. But the minute that you do that, your debt-to-income ratio goes through the roof and you can no longer afford to buy a house. Buy the house because it is far more difficult to buy a house than it is a car. You buy a house, and even if your debt-to-income ratio is high, there is a dealership that will take care of you. All right? Buy your house before you buy your toys. If you follow those simple rules, you could probably buy a house. All right? Watch your debt-to-income ratio. Don't overspend. Get your credit pooled. Get a joint account. Make it easier. Don't buy a car before you look into buying a house. And make sure that you pay your rent with a check. All right. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, let me know. I am happy to help, and best of luck to my new niece and my nephew. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Until next time, it's all for one and one for all.